Hey, you guys, Latricia Morris, the brand revivalist and owner of Ox and Iron. I am so excited today to get to bring in Mastermind Amy Dardis of Clear Authentic Brands. She is amazing when it comes to helping brands get their alignment, their internal alignment locked in. Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Can you share a little bit more about your company so our audience knows more about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we actually build hiring systems for businesses based on their brand identity. And so we actually look at like who they are, what they value, the types of people that thrive in their organization. And then we figure out like how do we actually build a process that puts the right person in the right seat. And so from the way we structure interviews to the questions that we ask to how we even onboard them to set them up for success. So I've been studying this process for the last I don't know, 5, 10 years almost, like on and off. And yeah, people are my passion. And this was kind of where I ended up.
I really love that because, when you look at any business that has gone through any level of brand development or business strategy, it may have come in to part of their marketing conversations or whatever, that most all business owners at this point, I think, are acquainted with exercises to really understand your ideal customer or your ideal client. But I
Mm.
love how you turn the view around, you turn that camera around, you're like, let's look at not just the ideal customer or client that we're looking to work with, but also the ideal team. What is it that prompted you to make that pivot in looking at brands and how to help them succeed?
Yeah, so my husband and I owned a web design and marketing agency for years, helping small service-based businesses in our local area. So we were in Montana at the time. And so I got into this, like figuring out this like brand strategy on the marketing side so we could help them tell their story. And then I actually ended up going to work for one of my clients, and he had hired me to be like marketing and e-commerce. And I was on the leadership team for a gas and welding distributor. And we had like 80 employees in 6 different locations. And we were trying to do all these things and we were implementing EOS. And the book Traction was like pivotal, super impactful in my business and how I approached this like clarity piece of branding and how like the health of a business, like how a business should actually run. And so I was in this company, and I realized that one, I was like needing to like figure out our marketing strategy and our brand strategy because the company had been around for 70 years and had never gone through like an actual like process to really define it. And then we were needing to hire people, and it was so painful because we needed to hire people and invest a lot into them, like into learning the gases and the products and the safety and the compliance. And then what would happen is they would only make it 6 months or a year or 2 years was like the mark. And so like if we lost them within 2 years, it was really painful and it was very expensive. And so I was like looking at this and I'm like, what are we doing in our hiring process that like is there something we can do better here? Like what are we actually doing? And there was no process, there was no strategy. And so that's when I kind of got into it and I started sitting in on all these interviews. And one of the things, like my unique gift is actually asking questions, which is how I learned how to like be able to pull information from people's brand stories. And I ended up finding that there was the connection of like we were looking at our core values, we were looking at what made us unique in the marketplace, we were looking at like what's our purpose and our why and our vision and our mission. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like this is exactly the type of people that we need on board. Like we need to know that one, they share these values. So I'm like, how do I figure that out? Like what questions do I need to ask? And then how do I actually make sure that their answers are legit and not just something that sounds good? And I just dove in, and then we figured it out there. And then I had all my other agency clients, and I was like, hey guys, can I test something out with you? Like, can we go through this process and figure this out? And then I just started studying it more and more and more. And that's when it was like, oh, wow, this is not complicated. It's very much aligned with like brand DNA, but also people wiring and DNA. And like, where do we find that alignment?
I love that. I think right now, if there's anything that I hear repeatedly from so many different business owners in so many different industries, it's complaints about turnover or difficulty in hiring, trying to find the right person. And they're like, man, I'm having trouble finding people that are even motivated to work. I actually saw something recently. I really appreciated it. It was a Layla Hermosi. She had posted something where she was talking
I love
about,
her.
you know, I know, I know. I love the different tilt she'll often put on HR and things like that. And one of the points she was talking about was how she was challenged to shift from language that was like, there are no good people at this thing, right? Or man, if only there were people that could do this, to saying, what skills am I lacking that I need to acquire to be able to find that kind of talent, to bring that kind of talent on, to get people in the right positions. What are some things you feel like are often red flags that you see in companies that maybe struggle with that even when they don't realize that they're actually struggling with it?
Yeah, I feel like I found a lot of bad practices that we've kind of adopted as a culture and a society that, oh, this is how we hire. And no one's ever really challenged the process to be like, why do we do it this way? Because what we're doing is we're just trying to get to know a person, and we have to understand how their brain is actually wired. And their resume doesn't exactly determine how their brain is wired. And I actually know that through personal experience because I was the unengaged, underperforming employee who did not enjoy my job. And I spent 10 years working for different companies in different roles. But I was sticking with like what I knew, what I'd kind of been introduced to. So I got into the banking and finance world. I started as a teller at a credit union. I moved on into like financial planning, and I worked for some really great companies. It wasn't that they were doing things wrong on the culture side. It's that the way my brain was wired to work and my unique gifting did not align with the roles that I was choosing. And so my own journey was this like process of self discovery. And then through that, I was like, oh, wow, how we think and our unique giftings are huge in this. Like they are the thing because work is good. Like I love work. I think being idle is not good. And I think people do want to work, but they want to feel good when they do it. They want to feel motivated, challenged, like they're growing. And like when they show up to do the work, it's like their brain is actually like moving and working and cylinders are like firing off instead of doing work where you're just like, okay, let's sit down and do this. So going back to your questions, in the hiring process, like one, I think businesses aren't clarifying the actual criteria that they're looking for. Like it's vague, it's not specific. And they need to be looking for not only like people who share our values, but also people who are going to thrive within our specific environment and the way that we work. And we need to know what specific traits and characteristics and mindsets and thought patterns are we looking for. And we're never going to know what questions to ask if we don't first define those specifics. And so we're stuck asking all the wrong questions. We're picking up like low signal information.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions you ask are going to 100% dictate the path that your conversation takes. You know, it's the difference between ending up being in a conversation talking about the weather versus being in a conversation talking about someone's like childhood trauma. I mean, it's like it's all a matter of what question you ask.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you were talking about the challenging the hiring process. I've seen so many years over, so many times over, where it seems that so many companies feel inclined to fall towards the default of they have an opening, they post the job, a bunch of people, hopefully a bunch of people apply for that job. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
maybe one or two that did apply months later, but for the ideal scenario for a lot of them, they have plenty of candidates and they get all these resumes. And then it's like, all right, which resume looks like it's best fitted to the job rather than really understanding the person that's being put in that role. And then
Yeah.
even, okay, this person might be, waving their hand up saying, hey, I'm interested in being considered for this position, not even realizing that it's like there's probably possibly another position within the company that their gifts are much better fitted for. Do you feel like you catch a lot of pushback from HR and other people that are so used to doing things that old way? And how, if so, how do you help them kind of see the light on the other side of shifting gears a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's always that hesitation of like, what do you mean, you know? But then when you like break down like the actual cost of what happened. So it's okay, so you've been doing it this way, and then let's talk about the whole picture here. So you bring this person on board, you go through your process, you write your job description that is super boring, and it's like, look at all the effort we put into sales and marketing to try and attract our ideal client, and then look at how we write a job description to attract like an amazing employee. It's like you would think that we would have like evolved in our job description writing. But even that right there, I look at some things and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like, you think like this does anything for people? But so you get that, and then you're like, okay, so then you bring this person on board, right? And then you either have like they're not doing the job well to the level that you need. And so you're dealing with poor performance, you're dealing with mistakes, that's hurting customers, that's hurting service, that's hurting retention. You're paying to clean up those mistakes, or you have safety and compliance issues. So let's add all that stuff up because this person is not performing to the level that this person is. Or you have someone who does perform well, but their attitude and their values are causing tension, frustration, the way they speak to people, the way they react. And it's like you are like, people aren't enjoying coming to work. And it always ends with someone's going to leave. Eventually, someone is going to leave. And it's either going to be the person you don't want to have leave because they're fed up with it, or it's going to be the person who should leave and we're happy that they do. And it's like those people where you fight and you fight and you fight and you do performance improvement plan and performance improvement plan and coaching conversation. And then they finally leave and the whole environment just changes. And then everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they're gone. And it's like, let's talk about all like that. And that's what your current process is getting you. And we have all these like, great business books like, Good to Great and Built to Last and Traction and Start with Why. And you read any book and it's all about make sure you have the right people on the bus, right? Like right person in the right seat. I'm not the only one like talking about this. I feel like this is like a commonly accepted principle, but the question is how? Like, how do you get the right person on the right seat? And that all starts with what you do in your hiring process and the questions you ask and the conversations you have and how you make that decision. And so once you kind of walk them through that, it is a little bit of a, here, let me show you how this can be different. But when we first started implementing this at the company that I was with, everybody was like, what? Like, are you sure? And then they, as part of the EOS framework that we do, we always would meet quarterly for strategic planning. And you always start with what's working, what's not working. And sure enough, we had what's working, our people process, what's working, our people process, like quarter after quarter, because we saw the incredible impact of bringing on really amazing people. Like, you bring on one really great person and it can change the game. And I feel like that is so exciting, especially for a small business. Like the people, these are people that we have to spend 40 hours a week with. And there's the saying, like, you become who you spend your time with. Well, it's like you spend your time more with the people at work than you do with your actual, like, close circle of friends. Why wouldn't we make that the best experience possible as a business owner? Like, why wouldn't we be willing to do that?
You know what I really love about everything that you're saying here is because I know I can remember very clearly the days that I look back to when I finally decided, I'm like, I'm not working for anybody else ever again. That was my own decision for me. And again, it's not for everybody, right? It's definitely its own ride and adventure going into business for yourself. But I look back on the years of different companies that I worked for, law firms that I worked for, different, real estate offices, you name it, so many different atmospheres. And there were several of them that I remember having the opposite experience, right? Like where it's like the very toxic work environment. You had a lot of toxic people that were in that place, and then you had a lot of great people. But then I also remember how much of an impact it had on me, not only during those work hours, but outside of those work hours. So, like
Mm.
during the work hours, even though I had the aptitude for doing the work that I was hired to do, I mean, my not as a flex, but like my work was highly commended many a times over. I was very demotivated to do it. I didn't want to be there. It was like every second on the clock was just like, get me out of here, because there were people in the work environment that just made me want to just cringe. I'm about to lose it here, because it was like maybe gossip or other bad behaviors that really shouldn't be. And it was like it was stuff that wasn't really dealt with because maybe somebody had tenure and they were close to retirement. They've been here so long and we can't replace them, and all these other ideas, not really appreciating, I think, the impact that workplace culture has on everybody working for that team, and then how that impacts the health of the company, the growth of the company. Having people that are excited to be at work, feel valued, feel heard, versus not so much ready to get out of here. Like, and then even just the life that they get to have outside of it. I
Yeah.
love seeing people who can genuinely say they love the work they do, and you see them transition from that day job that they love having to a healthier family life, better time outside of work. And it just like it's a whole picture that
It
comes
is.
together there.
Yeah. And I think that's what it all comes down to, at least for me, and like why I started doing this was I'm like, this is about people and these are people's lives. And I think like we are all wired uniquely and we have specific gifting. And there are some things that we are great at, and there's a lot of things we're not great at. But we only get so much time here on earth. And the relationships that we have in our life are important. And so I'm like, I do believe that one, we should work and we need to work for the most part. Like, I'm not promoting this idea of like, let's not work. I mean, I love to work. I do. It's thrilling, it's challenging, but I only love to do it when I'm doing stuff that I'm good at and that I'm passionate about. And I'm like, I want that for everybody to know that they have purpose and value and that they bring a contribution to their life, to the lives of the people around them. And when we get to do that at work, I think it 100% carries over to who we are when we come home. It's like how many people go home at the end of the day and they crack open a beer and they're tired and they are worn down and they don't want to engage with their family or their kids because it's just like the day freaking took it out of them. They had to deal with all this stuff at work. And it's like, that's someone's life. And I'm like, that is just that. And then we just accept that, right? We just accept that's normal. That's how it is. And then we spend year after year and it just like that burden just carries us down more and more and more until you get to a point where you forget, like you forgot what it was like to care about something. You forgot what it was like to do more than just live for the weekend. And then Sunday night comes around and you're just like, here we go again, but I got to pay the bills and I got to be able to do this for my family. And I'm like, to me, this is like heartbreaking because I'm like, this is your life. Like, this is going to pass you by. And I don't want you to get to the end of it and be like, what did I do? So it's like, and I'm like, I could go at this from like the job applicant side, but I also just like, I don't know, the path that God took me down had to do with businesses. And so I was like, I love business. Like I mean, I am a business owner. I know what that's like to have to figure out the processes and the offer and the things and then bringing on the people. And I'm like, I feel like we could help so many more people experience meaningful work and purpose and positive relationships through helping employers hire the right people than we could if we went at it from an individual basis.
So good. And when you look at taking it from the perspective of the business owner, I think for some business owners, it's like, man, we're already so busy and already there's so much going on that, some, I think they can hear this and maybe process like, okay, another thing that they need to get better at, another thing that they need to put. But
Yeah.
realistically, it's like, no, this is going to be a relief to you when you start to minimize or mitigate the distraction and the disruption that comes from having to rehire somebody else, do onboarding over again, train somebody else, have that loss of the financial loss to the company possibly for having lost somebody, then having to replace, and all that happens there. This can actually be something that helps to position a stronger team.
I think it's the only thing. I mean, as far as like and that's why I get so fired up about it, is because I think the team that you bring on board is time consuming and as painful as it can be in the beginning. It's the difference from like being reactive to then being proactive in your business, but it's also the catalyst to everything else that you're going to do in your business. Because if you don't have the team that you can trust, you can't delegate and elevate. You can't bring on more clients. You can't scale with your reputation, with your quality, with your service. It is all dependent on your people. And even implementing processes, even implementing technology, even implementing AI, getting your people on board, you have to have the right people to implement those processes, to implement that technology, to come up with these ideas, to run the back. I mean, it's like, to me, it's like, it all comes down to people. And so if we can get this one process right, like this one thing, I feel like there's nothing that your business can't then accomplish. Like if you have the right person with the right marketing and sales and skill sets, they're going to help you drive your lead gen. If you have the right person with like the admin and the ops and the systems and stuff, they're going to help you implement that. And then as a business owner, like you are not trying to do everything on your own. You're not constantly cleaning up all the process, all the problems and I think that's what kills us, honestly. Like as a business owner myself, like self-performing everything that I am not good at is the worst.
That is way more painful. It's way, way worse.
I'm like, all I want to do is just spend my day doing things that I'm really good at. And there's a lot of things that I'm not really good at.
Yep. Well, and it's like you're looking at how can I create a space to create a healthy environment that invites the right people in so that their giftings come into play. I can focus on what I'm skilled at. They can thrive and find fulfillment doing what they're skilled at and what
Mhm.
makes them come alive. Because it's like I can look at it and say, bookkeeping, data, spreadsheets, all that. I don't want to look at. Can I do it? Sure. Do I want to? No. I hate it. I don't want to do any of it. Right. But then there are people out there that I know that are like, oh my gosh, I love spreadsheets. I'm like, you go, girl, because it is not me. Being able to see people come into alignment with each other, I feel like that has so much power and potential for really any brand, especially
Mhm.
that has any ambition of scaling, growing, or even just becoming somewhat self-sustaining, right? Like
Yeah.
to have a healthy company.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's evident that this is an issue because I mean, I've gone to so many business conferences, and have hundreds of businesses there who are running, successful businesses, but yet this culture, talent attraction, I mean, it is a topic that is not going away. So it's like, all right, why do we still keep talking about this at every conference? Why is this still such a painful thing? Because clearly the things that we're trying and that we're doing, they're not fixing the problem. And I'm always like, okay, let's not keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to see different results. But it all, for me, it all just came back to this like clarity piece, like this clarity piece really being the foundation, not only in my own life, like just as an individual. It's like, who am I? What am I good at? What am I called to? Like, where am I going? What kind of wife do I want to be? What kind of mom do I want to be? And it was being able to answer those questions that really helped me make better decisions in my life to be that person. And I'm like, okay, same thing with our marketing and branding strategy, right? It's like when you talk about a business, when you talk about branding and strategy, It is what, like, why should your clients choose you? Why should your customers choose you? What do you bring to the marketplace? What do you offer? And what are the processes that you have built in that are going to deliver on that experience so that they're happy, your reputation grows, you attract more of your ideal customers, like your messaging is all lined in. And then so it's like, okay, that same framework, that same idea applies to who we attract in our company to know, like, one, because we can't deliver that experience unless our people know what experience we're delivering. But it's like that having that clarity of like, what do we value? Really, like as a company, what is important to us? What are our standards? Like, what do we say is not tolerated? So instead of like, oh, well, we don't accept lying or theft, but it's like, what about gossip? Where do you stand on excuses? Where do you stand on shifting blame? Where do you stand on doing the bare minimum and not achieving excellence? Like, let's take out all of these other behaviors that often we let slide. And by calling it out clearly at the beginning, you basically create this standard that says, okay, now we've actually called it out. Like, now we've actually defined it. And so we can't just like avoid it or let it slide. And by making things so clear, it really points out the obvious that says, okay, you're acting like this, but we said that this is not how we act. Like, these are our expectations. And so that creates this like clear standards, which I think a lot
Mhm.
of businesses don't have for behavior. Like, how do we actually operate? And when we say we value integrity or honesty, and I air quote that just because it's so cliche and it's so vague. And it's like, how does
Right.
that guide your behavior or your decision or your action? And if we don't give people clear expectations, how can they ever meet them? They can't. And how can we ever filter for them or ask questions to make sure that, is this really a person who acts like this? Well, we can't if we don't first clarify it. And so this clarity piece was just like, I feel like it was just like this huge aha moment in a lot of different areas.
Right. Well, I love that you use the term expectations, and I go to that a lot when it comes to like establishing a business that has a strong reputation. How do you do that, right? Like a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that that starts and stops at having a great product or service, but that is just not true. It's like
Mhm.
every business, either intentionally or unintentionally, is creating and supporting a set of expectations. And then when you look at the negative reviews, the negative feedback, the backlash, or any of those things, it's not always that the product or service that was originally promised falls short. It's that somewhere in there was an expectation that didn't get met. And it's often because the expectation was not set to begin with. So people are left to guess. And that's one of the things that I'm like, man, we should be having more of the conversation of bringing brand internal as much as external, because it's
Absolutely.
like we have so many people that are hired onto teams. They're expected to do a great job. They want to do, nobody wants to be like, I want to be the employee that sucks. You know what I mean? Like, really, some people may be a little bit more motivated than others, but I don't think anybody comes to work wanting to do a bad job, wanting to get chewed out. A lot of times it's that they're set to a task but don't really know what success looks like in that role.
Hmm.
And especially when it comes to the brand and communicating that brand, I'm really big on especially making sure that there is alignment between the stakeholders, the top, your top level leadership, and the people that are your frontline workers. Why? Because a lot of the times the discussions about the brand happen in that boardroom, but then they don't get accurately communicated down line to the people that are supposed to represent that brand to the
Yeah.
world. And they're even the employee with the best skill set, the best intentions is left to guess. And then if they guess wrong, then it's like punishable by whatever probation or possibly losing. I mean, it creates a weak framework where what could happen if we start to set clear expectations, use what you're talking about, that strategic brand alignment internally to integrate it into the hiring process, integrate it into onboarding, and set expectations that now we're in agreement. It's not
Hmm.
here is what you're going to do, but we're in agreement that this is how we're going to do it. And there's accountability without so much offense. So it's like
Absolutely.
it creates a healthier atmosphere for all.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that is missed so often in the hiring process, where it's like, an employer will make sure that they're asking all the questions and stuff, but they're actually not taking that time within the process to communicate their expectations up front, to say, look, we want you to know what you are getting yourself into. We want you to know that this is how we operate. These are our expectations. And if this doesn't sound like you, if this isn't a fit for you, it's okay to walk away. And we want you to walk away, because if you come on and this is not like you don't thrive within these expectations, you're going to be unhappy, we're going to be unhappy, and our clients are going to be unhappy. And that's just, no one wins in that situation. So by even being able to share these with the hiring person up front, and so it starts with, okay, what do we put in our job description and our recruiting messaging that attracts people who are like, yeah, that speaks to me, like I resonate with that. And then you move on into your interview process and you're asking questions, but you're also communicating and you're sharing, and you're like, hey, this is what we're looking for. If you're not this person, I will tell you right now, not gonna go well for you. Even that, being that
Right.
direct, and that's okay. So that way they know, wow, okay. Like I can read job descriptions and be like, oh gosh, I would hate that. No, thank you.
Mhm.
And then there's other ones, but a lot of them don't communicate that. There is no filtering message, pre-qualifying message. And it's the same way we do in marketing, right? Is like we qualify our customers. So we are working with the right kind of customer who's going to value what we bring to the table, instead of them wanting something else. And then they would be a better fit for a different outfit, but then they come work with us and then they're mad, we're stressed, bad review. Like you said, those unmet expectations, because everybody has expectations, whether they communicate them or not. Like employees have expectations of, I'm going to walk in and this is what I'm going to experience. The employer has expectations of, this is what I want. But oftentimes we fail to communicate that like early on in the process. And so you move through your interview process and then into your onboarding process, and it's the same thing. It's not just paperwork. It's not just, oh, bank account and routing and take this sexual harassment training. Like it's, actual, like, let me share with you the vision of our company. Let's talk about the big
Mm.
picture. These are our ideal clients. This is how we serve them. This is how we, and we share with them like the whole picture of, this is how often we check in with our employees. This is what we expect from you. This is what success looks like. This is what you can expect within your first 6 months here. This is how we review people. This is what your performance is based off of. Like this is how we make decisions as a company, and it's just, and it's I mean, you can do that within like an hour conversation of just sitting down and just sharing with them, and like actually orienting them to how your company operates. But it's like everything you're doing throughout this process is like reinforcing this message, but we can't do that if we don't have it clearly defined to begin with.
Right. Well, I love that you're saying, okay, like clarify the vision, then share that vision with the people that are expected to go out and carry out that mission and vision of the company. Because I think that one of the things that gets so often missed is like, they have employee appreciation day, maybe, right? Bonus programs, maybe, but it's like, are you allowing people to find meaning in the work that they're doing? Are you helping them to see what they are part of helping to build, right? Not
Mm.
just, well, we just need somebody to check the mail and scan it in and do this. It's like, no, you are actually helping us to further this mission doing this, right?
Yeah.
And when you were talking a while ago, one of the things that my mind went back to was looking at how many times over people have made claims about the current generation in terms of the workforce. Now, looking for a second at the external brand, we've seen so many advances and so many shifts that have happened as we've realized that there has been definitely a shift of power dynamics where it has gone from, corporate used to kind of hold the power. Like if they were your neighborhood store, that's just who you went to. And now consumers have the choice right there in their pocket, whether they're going to accept you or not, whether you're going to
Mhm.
be invited into their world or not. So we understand, okay, we need to actually put some effort into being relevant and being part of their story. And all of these other things. We understand that consumers of today have a different expectation. But what I'm hearing is more like that we should probably be appreciating too that the workforce of our time has a different set of expectations, right? Like they're expecting us to show up a little bit differently than maybe what employers have in the past. And it's not that they don't want to work, as so many people claim, right? That the younger generation, they just don't want to work. Nobody wants to work. Nobody. Okay, maybe they're just expecting businesses to show up a little bit better and a little bit more intentional. Empathy, things like that are big words that people use these days. They want to see that in a business. Well, why would they want to see that in the business as a customer, but not as an employee? It's like all of these different things that they're expecting. On the other side of it, are we giving it the same consideration?
And that's the thing, is like, it all just comes down to people, right? And it's like, employees are customers of somebody else's business. And it's like, you're just dealing with people, and you can't treat your employee differently than you treat your client, because we're all human beings that make we choose where are we going to invest our time, energy, money, resources. That's it. It's like, am I going to invest it working for this company and, pursuing this work? Am I going to spend it, supporting this business because I believe with them? And yeah, there is a level of authenticity, I think, that is being required, especially in marketing today. Oh my gosh, like, it's like, gone are the days of just, just spitting out stuff. It's like, now people are like, give me something to believe in. Like, and I love Simon
Yes.
Sinek, Start With Why. I mean, I feel like that was so good, because it really does. And especially, everyone's talking about AI and stuff. And I'm like, AI is going to do a lot of stuff, and it's a huge disruptor. But at the same time, it's like our human need for human connection, to be inspired, to be valued, to be challenged, to grow, that will not change, right? It's like, we need human connection. I was like talking to my husband about this, and we're like, you could do a therapy session with your AI person, but is that going to make you feel the same way as just sitting across a table with a person and having a cup of coffee and talking about the same thing? No. And so it's like, when it comes to hiring and stuff, it's like, you're literally just sitting across the table from someone saying, do you want to invest your time, energy, money, resources into us, like, doing things together? And it's both parties making that decision. Like, it is both, because the employee, the person, they need to be just as like adamant and particular, and like, hey, hold yourself, like, look for the best for you that aligns with your gifting, with what you want out of life, with a work environment that's going to help you, be the kind of mom and wife and husband, or, father that you want to be. And it's recognizing that there's something for everybody out there, right? It's like, there's people who want to work 50 hours a week because they're so competitive and they're so intense, and they like can't sit still, and they live
Yeah.
off that energy. People exist like that. And there's people who are like, I want structure, I want routine, I want predictability. I thrive within knowing I can get up every day. I know exactly what's expected. I like doing the same thing every day because that's what helps me relax. And then there's other people who are like, no way. I want freedom. I want flexibility. I want to be surprised. And I'm in that party. But it's like, and I think that's the beauty of figuring out, what is your company? Like, what kind of work style do you have? And then finding people who are like drawn to that and attracted to that. And like, they're going to be really happy doing that, versus somebody else who's like, and it's not about like people not wanting to work. I think it's people just being more aware of like, wow, there's different ways to think about this. There's, especially with the way that technology and Zoom and all this stuff now, it's like, wow, I don't have to go to work and sit somewhere for, 5 days a week. I don't have to do that anymore. Like, that used to be, that was just kind of your only option. And now
Right.
there's choices. And so it's like, there's not a wrong choice or a right choice. It's just what makes sense for you? Because I know some people who are like, I do not want to work at home. And then there's people who are like, I don't want to go in the office, or a mixture of both. But it's just that life, it's like, this is your life. This is your life.
Well, I think it's important with that of understanding, like, okay, how you operate. I know for myself, I went through a season years back of almost kind of like a what's wrong with me kind of thing, where I just never thrived being in a single spot day in, day out, looking at the same walls. I joke now that I am a gypsy worker. I love to work. I have a tendency to go too heavy, if anything, in the direction of like, like you're still working, like, but I'm just taking care of this one thing because I get excited to see things
Yes.
being created and coming together. The monotonous stuff and the tedious stuff, maybe not as much, but that's just part of my wiring. And I think there is a massive shift that happens when we learn to honor that too, and learn
Yes.
to honor that in other people as well as honor it in ourselves, of saying, okay, I'm out looking for position to work with this kind of company. This is I love that you said work style, because there are very different atmospheres that people can be plugged into, where they might be perfect at the job that you need them to do. They might be so crazy talented, very hardworking, have all the skills, but you put that one plant in the wrong environment, and
Mhm.
then maybe they're not going to grow. Whereas, like, you put them in the right environment, and they're just going to like take off, and it's going to
Yeah,
be better for everybody.
for sure. I know. I did that same thing. That's how I kind of like how I came to learn about and understand this like work style concept, because I was also like, I worked had to be there at 7, didn't get to leave till 4, had to sit at my desk all day, like, and I felt trapped. I felt so like I
Mm.
could not wait to get out of there. And I worked for a really great company. Like, it wasn't them, it was me. But I remember being at that job and I was like praying every day. And I'm like, I feel like I was made for more. I feel like I'm missing out on something. And I
Mm.
don't know what it is at this point because I didn't. But I felt that restlessness and that just like I was apathetic towards my work. And it wasn't them. Like, it was not them. And then I left that and I actually went full time into being an entrepreneur, which I'd never done before. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, like, I love this. I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life. And I was like, wow, I'm kind of a workaholic too. Like, but this is fun. And then I had to learn how to, create boundaries and balance
Yeah.
and all the other things. But that was when I was like, oh wow. And then when I went to work for a company again 5 years later, because it was a client, I did tell him, I was like, if you want me to work for you, I was like, I cannot. Don't put me at a desk. Don't put me in a cubicle. Like, if you want my best work, it will not happen with me sitting in an office. And he honored that. And like, that was huge, like, to have a boss who was willing. But I asked for it at the beginning. Like, but like I set that expectation at the beginning to say, I know this about myself. And
Mm.
and he was willing to work with that. And it was great. And I was like, wow, it wasn't like having a job is bad or working is bad. Cause then I went in and I had 4 years of saying, I love my job. My job, like, I wasn't doing entrepreneur stuff. I was helping run, a company. And I was like, and people would be like, how's work? And I'd be like, it's great. Like, I love it. And then I just got more and more into this people thing. And we had the people thing. Well, I guess I started to really be like, wow, this is something I'm really passionate about. And then God called me to actually to build that and to continue to study and focus on that completely. So then I did leave that position, but that was a few years
I
ago.
think that is beautiful. And like just the power of this subtle realignments, right? Like sometimes we think like when there's trouble in the water or there's stuff going awry or there's the high tone, like sometimes it can be like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to make these massive changes. Sometimes it's the little things. Like you were like,
Yeah.
okay, just honoring a work style, for example, like that little shift. One of the things that you were talking about a while ago, you were saying, you recognized, you were saying like, this is me, this is not them, this is just understanding how I work. And I remember back when I used to work in real estate before I launched my company, the last brokerage I was at was a commercial real estate office, which was a great step over from my degree in paralegal studies. And I was like trying to figure life out, whatever. I
Yeah.
went around the mountain. Okay. I went a long way around the mountain. But, anyways, like I remember having the conversation with our broker at that time, and I'm still friends with them today. They still like, they'll send referrals my way. We still keep in touch, and it's a good relationship. But I felt like part of that was like saying, okay, honoring each other and being respectful with each other, and also respecting, each other's goals. And like there was a time when I was working for that brokerage that things were growing, and I realized I couldn't climb two ladders at the same time. Like things were picking up with the commercial real estate, but then also with my agency. And it kind of came to a crossroads of saying, I was recognizing that it was time to make a decision without even having the conversation with my broker. She's like, I feel like you're doing so great, but you'd be doing better if you were just focused on one thing. And she was like, if you could do so great in commercial real estate. And I told her, I'm like, I appreciate that, but realistically, I know that I have to go the other way. I said, if I close the doors on that and stay with this, it's gonna be regret and resentment, and it won't be because of you at all. It
Right.
won't be because of anything that you did, because like she's great, but it would have just been because I know that I would have chosen wrong, right at that point.
Or-
Being willing to say, okay, wherever it is that you're at, like honor that, recognize it. And, sometimes we do a job. I think sometimes we take a job or do a job for a season and a reason, right? We're growing through it where it may not necessarily always be the best fit, but I think it's like still being honest with ourselves about the big picture there. So
Mhm.
when you're talking about the alignment that you help brands step into internally, what are maybe some quiet symptoms that you see that they often overlook that indicate that they probably should be looking at a little bit more at their internal systems?
I mean, the obvious one is gonna be I'm gonna say retention, but I'm gonna say that with like a caveat with it because just like you said, I don't think retention is the result of retention doesn't equal tenure, right? So it's like this idea of alignment being it's right person, which means you have the character to thrive in the organization, right seat, which means you have the capacity to excel in the role. And then there's this third element, which is contribution. And that is something that changes with the seasons as we grow and develop because our contribution is one, it's growth and being challenged. It's us needing to feel that. It's value and appreciation, knowing that we're seen and we're valued. We feel valued. We bring value. And then it's also just like our own passion and like impact that we're having on what we're doing. And because we grow, because we change, the idea is that when you're in alignment, you are bringing value. And because of this intersection between you and the business, your life is better, you become who you need to be, and the business is made better. Now, if that separates, it's going to separate because there's friction and tension, but it could be that you're growing and you're developing, like you're ready for more. The question is, can you continue to grow within that organization and it's staying aligned, or are you being called to grow out of it and it's not them, it's not bad, it's just because the way that you need to grow no longer aligns with how they need to grow. And that's when those separate, and that's okay. Like that's good because that can happen with retirement, that can happen with just life happening, or it can happen because like I was getting more and more passionate about hiring processes and people. The business needed more like marketing and e-commerce, and I was just like what they needed I could no longer, I was going in a different direction. And so it wasn't bad, it was just time. So that's like the third part of alignment when it goes to retention. But like when businesses are looking at like what is the issue, it always is going to come down to you're looking at three things. And so if you have people who are right person, wrong seat, which means like you have someone who's low performance, which means that like they are not doing the job to the level and expectation or excellence. And I'm not looking at are they just meeting the bare minimum. I'm looking at are they excelling in this role and how is that looking? One, you have to be able to define that. Like if you can't define that, if you don't have a way to measure it, you're not going to know if they're excelling or not. But you're probably going to have some multiple roles of the same person. Like if you might have a couple salespeople or a lot of salespeople. If you only have one, then like, are you hitting numbers and goals? And you have to be able to like diagnose that. Like, how is this person performing? But they're, if the right person, it's like, yeah, they're just in the wrong seat. So we have to have a filter to be able to recognize that and have that conversation. And maybe there's an opening, or maybe there's not. Or you have someone who's good at their job, but you have they're the wrong person. So they don't have the character to thrive. And again, this always comes back to clarity, right? So it's like if we don't know what those values are, we don't know how to analyze them objectively to say our values are that we take ownership, we have extreme candor, and we push the limits. And then we know what that looks like. Okay, when I look at this person and I look at their behavior over the past 6 months or a year, not a week, we're looking at what is going on, what are we missing here? And then sometimes that can be an issue of like bandwidth. Sometimes like people can stop performing because they just have too much on their plate. Or sometimes like they're going through something personally. Maybe there's some kid issues, maybe there's some relationship issues outside of work that are tapping into that emotional and mental bandwidth that are affecting. And so the question is, do we love them and guide them and support them through this season to get them, because we know this is temporary, we know that they're in alignment and we're going to move through it? Or is this something where we're not going to be able to continue on and we're going to have to separate that? But everything comes back to, if our standards are subjective, we can't make these decisions and we can't have these conversations. But if they're objective and they're defined, we can actually put it into, like I use an alignment evaluation tool, and it literally breaks down all of these different areas. So we can look at it and say, are they living up to these behaviors? Are they living up to these expectations? And then we can pinpoint what is the issue that's going on. And then the other thing I think is super important, and I learned this through the EOS, is to have conversations with your team on a quarterly basis. So, and I'm not even going to say performance review. I'm going to say like sit down, have a 45-minute conversation with your person about how they're excelling in their role, how they're like aligning with the character in the organization, and how they're feeling about their contribution and how you feel about their contribution. And it's a conversation. It says 4 times a year, we sit down, we get outside of the day-to-day operations and we talk about what's going on in your life. How are you feeling? Like, are you feeling appreciated, challenged, motivated? Here's how I see you growing. Here's how you're in line with these things. And that will keep us like a pulse on how people are actually performing, and not just performing, but how they're doing, how they're feeling.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you say do it quarterly, be intentional about making it a regular part of your flow for your business, because that is so important for maintaining the health of a business. I see too many times over where certain systems or processes get put into place. They maybe go through and they do a rebrand or they do whatever. And then it's like, okay, we did that and move on. And it's like, no, like all that work that you put into that, there needs to be an intentional system. It doesn't mean it has to be an exorbitant amount of work. It doesn't mean it has to be like, hours on hours on hours of your time every day. It just means that there needs to be some intentionality in safeguarding what's been created and promoting that healthy atmosphere so that the company can continue to thrive. What would you say are some of the things that you notice shift in a company when they say, you know what? Yes, Amy, you're right. We need to work on this. We need to be intentional. And they start to implement these practices with their hiring, their onboarding, and their team maintenance. What are some of the fruits of that effort that you tend to see?
Oh man. So one, I mean, I've seen businesses when they start to get the right people on board, they start to grow. Like they start to come up with new ideas that they never would have before because they didn't have the right skill set or perspectives on like these people bring on brilliance. I've seen trust and like just dynamics change, like the overall atmosphere of a company change where people are like, I love working here. I feel valued and taken care of, and work becomes fun. And that switch can happen so fast when you're clear about what your expectations are and you know you have the right people in the right seat. And then just the ability to then like innovate and like actually have a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And to me, this is the biggest one because you could sell the exact same products and services, but if you have your people component dialed in, you will far outpace, out exceed because your people can talk to each other, they can trust each other, they can bring new ideas to the table. And the people you're investing in want to be there. So you have higher productivity, you have higher engagement, and they're actually like excited because they know that they're valued. They know that they're a part of something. They know that they're contributing. And it doesn't matter what role they are. Like there is no one role that's more important because like we need all of the roles. And if you can like be so intentional about calling out the value every role has, I mean, it's amazing because people know they show up to work and what they do matters. Yeah, I really think like the people is like it is your biggest competitive advantage or it is your biggest bottleneck. Like it will either help you grow or it will be the thing that tears apart your business from the inside out. And it all comes down to people.
Whew, underscore that. All right. So, Amy, for people who say, I'm tracking with you, I get it, get my people stuff under wraps, I just don't even know where to start. Where can they start by finding you online to see about maybe collaborating with you to get that going for their own business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk about all this content on a weekly basis on my own podcast, which is Building a Clear Authentic Brand, or on our website, clearauthenticbrands.com. We have hiring resources that we put out there. And then we also talk about like what our system is. And if they want help implementing it with us, then we can help them. But the idea that, I mean, my whole goal is there are so many more businesses out there that I can't help one-on-one. And so I am teaching this framework so that businesses can go and implement it themselves. They can do it themselves. But if they're like, okay, that's a lot of time and energy, and I want this, but I don't want to do it myself, then that's where we're like, okay, we would love to do this for you so we can get it done. We can get it done fast and we can implement it. But just the same way, like the book Traction kind of changed my life and gave me principles that I could implement. I mean, that's my heart and goal behind like putting out the podcast and the resources and I have a training as well. And that's all accessed through our website.
Excellent. Amy, thank you so much, you guys. As promised and as usual, I am going to be making sure that you have the link, all of the links in the comments below so that you can catch up with Amy. Make sure you subscribe to her podcast, follow along with her for ways to grow a beautiful and impactful business. Amy, I really appreciate everything that you contributed today. And I so look forward to getting to connect with you again here soon. And you guys don't forget to hit the subscribe before you leave this channel so you can learn more about building a brand and a business you genuinely love. Thank you so much. Bye.